Welcome to the Listen Up podcast, where we explore hearing loss, communication, connections, and health.
Hey everybody, Dr. Mark Sims here. I'm the host of the Listen Up podcast, where I feature top leaders in healthcare. Past guests include Dave Howitt, Jan Janssen, and Christine Manapez. This episode is brought to you by Listen Up Hearing Centers. I help patients to effectively treat their hearing loss so they can remain independent and socially connected with friends and family. The reason I'm so passionate about hearing loss is because I lost my brother Robbie twice. First, the hearing loss from the radiation to a brain tumor, and then again from the brain tumor itself. That's why I really care deeply about hearing loss and treating it well. I only care for ears. I'm the E of ENT. I've performed over 10,000 ear surgeries over the past 20 years. I'm the founder of Listen Up Hearing Centers, and I've also written a book of the same title called Listen Up, A Physician's Guide to Effectively Treating Your Hearing Loss. You can learn more about it at www.listenuphearing.com. Today, I'm excited. I have a good friend of mine, Tony Manna, is president of Cochlear North Americas and is responsible for the development and execution of the strategic direction of North American operations for Cochlear Corporation, which is out of Australia. Tony joined Cochlear Corporation in 2005 and has over 30 years of experience in the medical device industry. When he joined Cochlear, he was the VP of sales and then moved on to the general manager of Cochlear Bone Anchored Solutions United States, and then the president of Cochlear Bone Anchored Solutions in Sweden. I remember him commuting back and forth to Sweden a lot in the past, but he's now the big cheese in North America for Cochlear Corporation. Tony, thanks for coming on. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. Quite honored to be asked.
Yeah, it's great to see you. Tony and I do share many things in common. One is he still resides in Philadelphia, and I'm from Philadelphia, so we're both Philadelphians, and that's one of the reasons I think we hit it off. So Tony, tell me about your pathway to Cochlear. So you were in other spaces of the medical industry, and then so how did you get in the hearing space and remain? That's the other thing. Most people seem to get into the hearing space and never leave.
Yeah, so I'm an engineer by education, but I did not want to become an engineer. I knew that kind of 2 years through college. I also didn't want to start over. So my last 2 years of college were kind of rough. Engineering can be difficult, and especially if you're not sure that's what you want to do. And I got lucky enough to get into a medical device company, a little privately held company at the time called Cochlear Instruments, which was ophthalmic. Was still being run by the sons of the founders. They were based out of the UK. And so I did that for a couple of years. And then went to a public company that did female healthcare. And I was mainly in female healthcare from 1990 to about almost 2000. I had worked my way up the ranks, had become a vice president, and then made a quality of life decision in 2000, decided I did not want to be a vice president. I wanted to stay home with my kids and spend more time with them. And that's how I found my way to a little company called Gyrus Medical, which was in female healthcare and ENT, and made my way over to the ENT side of the business. And that's where I operated from 2003 to 2005. It's where I met the previous CEO of Cochlear. And in 2005, he asked me to come join him at Cochlear, telling me it was the best job I would ever have, and that if I wanted to, I could finish my career at Cochlear.
Very precious.
Yeah. And so to your point about how I got here and how I stayed, the reason why I got here was I happened to have a dinner next to a Cochlear implant recipient who told me about her journey. And that's what infatuated me with it. The first 6 months were rough because the cochlear implant industry isn't like any other medical device industry. I'm careful to even call it a medical device industry, but it is. And once I figured that out, and I had some really good mentors in the company help me, I was like, yeah, this is a place I could stay at. And I really don't care what I do as long as I can stay living in Philadelphia. And that's how I got here.
So when you say it's different than other parts of the medical device industry, expand on that. Tell the listeners a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it's quite complex. The candidate for a cochlear implant is someone who you spend a lot of time with learning, helping them with their journey, going from where they're at in their hearing journey to possibly getting a cochlear implant. And then when they get a cochlear implant, they become a recipient and they're married to your company. They have this device implanted in them and you have to take care of them. And, we hope the devices last forever, for their lifetime. But sometimes they don't, and sometimes they need help. And then on top of that, there is the professional component, your audiologists, that we work with. And we're all there to help the patient. And it's a round the clock job. Patient goes off the air for any issue on a Saturday, they're calling us. They want, and they want an answer. And it hasn't gotten any easier in the past few years when, once a patient enters that recipient part of it, right, they're less reliant on the professional and they're more reliant on Cochlear, on the company. And they want us to be like everybody else that they deal with. So, they'll call us up and they want a solution in a couple hours. Remember, we get compared to Amazon now. Our customer service levels and our response times, we get compared to some of the great customer service organizations in the world. But we're still medical
bar,
device.
right? They want to be able to go to like the Apple Genius Bar, right? And walk up.
Exactly. They want to go to Genius Bar. They want, they can get dinner delivered in 2 hours. How come I can't get a microphone cover right away? Those kind of things. So, so it's led to just a extremely complex. If you're a business junkie, you love the business, but extremely rewarding company.
Yeah, I mean, as compared to other medical devices, like, if you get a hip replacement, I mean, obviously the recipient interacts with it, meaning they walk with it every day and do athletics or whatever they do with it, but they're not actually directly putting something on their body and, changing out parts and charging batteries. So it's a substantially different relationship.
Yeah, and I think, as you deal with this more than I do, right? The hearing changes over time, right? The implant uh, body interface changes, and you sometimes, someone's doing well, and then you get a phone call, and they're like, "Hey, I'm not doing so well." They have to come in, you have to adjust it, and you see less of that in other parts of medical device.
Yeah, well, I mean, going back to the hip replacement, right? They do an X-ray and they show that it's either well seated or not well seated, that type of thing. I mean, being that the brain has so much to do with hearing, that's a big black box in some ways. We just aren't really good at being able to get very super granular.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So,
I think the
so
more we know, the more we realize what we don't know.
yeah, yeah. And so when you're running this organization, what are your biggest challenges in terms of, taking care of these recipients?
So, those change every day, right? Every month, those kind of challenges change. I take a broader view of it. And what I try to do, and it's the only thing that really keeps me up at night, except a couple of times in the industry, things happen really fast. Maybe that's going to keep me up at night. But generally, I just try to provide a really good environment for employees to excel. And if I can do that, then the professional customer and the recipient and the candidate will all get taken care of. I shouldn't worry down to the detail about every phone call that's being made and all that, because if I provide the right environment for people to succeed, they will. Because generally, people want to do good. So that's what we try and do. We try and do that. It's been harder with COVID. It's been, particularly hard with, your employees need to be home with a child. They
Yeah.
need to be home with a parent. And so we're working through that. We've tried. I'm old school. Me, I like getting up and walking around and seeing everybody and talking to them and finding out what's going on. And when you're in a building that should have 500 people in it and it has 100, that makes it harder. But we have to adapt to what our employees need, and
Sure.
and they're proving over time that we can make this work.
And how do you maintain your corporate culture in this environment?
We spend a lot of time on it. I think if you ask most leaders of organizations, they will tell you that culture is the most important thing they have going on. We spend a lot of time talking about it, workshopping it, whether it's on a Zoom call or in person. The really, when we are open, when the office is open, we try and get people to come in that work together, try and come in on the same day and spend some time together. That seems to work. Do some things fall through the cracks? Yeah, they do. But that's just part of adjusting, and we'll figure it out.
Do you think your culture is as strong now as it was before the pandemic?
I think it is, in that
That's good.
people have come to understand each other better. They're on the lookout for each other. Um, it's not so much as I show up at 8 and I leave at 6. It's, gee, look who's sending me an email at 9 at night. Why are they doing that? And that's gotten through the entire organization. So yeah, I think we're better. I think we take care of each other better through. We're trying to be more cognizant of work-life balance. I'm terrible at work-life balance because my family's in Philadelphia and my job is in Denver or wherever I'm visiting customers. At one time it was in Sweden. So I'm not a good barometer of that, but I do one thing, and that's at 5 o'clock I take an hour for myself. Doesn't matter where I am. At about 5 o'clock I try to take an hour for myself, or 2 hours, and then I get back to whatever I'm doing.
What do you do
But
during that hour?
I might go for a bike ride. I might run, some sort of exercise.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
It's kind of where I get my time to think. Um, and I do that, and I tell people they should do that. But if you have somebody who's always worked in an office and always left their laptop at the office, and now you tell them to go work from home and to bring their laptop home, and they walk by the second bedroom and there's a laptop, and I go, let me finish this for work. Next thing you know, it's 11 o'clock at night, and they're still sitting at their desk, and their work-life balance is, gone out the window.
Sure.
So we try to, let people know that work expands the amount of time you give it. Make sure you're not giving it all your time.
Well, that's really great to hear for Cochlear employees, and so given those, where do you see things going over the next 5 years for Cochlear Americas? Like, what are the big challenges ahead for you guys, assuming that the pandemic comes to some sort of head and resolve, or it's
Yeah,
here,
I think.
I think is the real.
Yeah, look, I mean, everything you read and listen to, it appears it's going to be endemic. We'll have to deal with that. I think our challenge remains what has always been the challenge of cochlear implants, and that's awareness. Um, most people are not aware that that's an option for them, and some people that are aware think it's the last option as opposed to the next option, right? I'm going to end up getting a cochlear implant. I know it, or as opposed to, well, if this doesn't work out, I might get a cochlear implant. That might be where it brings me, and that is still our biggest issue, I think, for the industry. There's lots of things we can do to make them easier to work with, more mainstream, easier to program, easier to use, um, and all that. And we've done that over years. I mean, the business has changed significantly over the last 40 years. To me, it changes about every 5 or 6 years. It changes a lot.
Yeah,
But
something
awareness,
and other things never change. It's kind of one of the
yeah,
problems.
yeah, yeah. But awareness to me is still the biggest issue. That this is an option that's available.
Yeah, no, I definitely. And how about for your company with the increasing awareness? And so, what type of initiatives do you see as perhaps being, effective in that respect?
So right now, we we spend a fair amount of time on direct to consumer marketing. So
Right.
we go right to the person who might be a candidate. So if you pick up AARP, there's a good chance you'll see one of our advertorials in there. We have about 35 people in the field and another dozen inside whose sole job is to work with people who believe they might be candidates. So if we do this AARP ad and somebody answers the ad, we try and determine if they're candidates. Sometimes they don't even have their first hearing aid yet. They just want to
Right.
know if they can get their hearing aid paid for. But
Their
sometimes they've
hearing
been in hearing
technology.
aids.
They just want
Yeah,
their hearing technology paid for.
yeah, yeah. Sometimes they've been in hearing aids for 25 years and can't even have a phone conversation with them. You
Right.
have to email to talk to them. So we work with them all the way. We spend it's a significant amount of our marketing budget goes to that. The second thing we're doing is we're working with audiologists, so private practice audiologists who are in standalone clinics who typically just sell hearing aids, are looking to expand. They're looking to do more things, and we will work with them to make cochlear implants available to them. We call that the Cochlear Provider Network. And what we try to do is connect them with a surgeon who will do the implant, who will put the implant in, and then the patient will go back to that audiologist for programming. We spend a lot of time training them because we want to make sure that outcome is good. Yeah. So, and we hold their hands as much as we can. We're involved with them. We'll do anything we can to make sure that patient outcome is good. And then lastly, we several years ago bought a little company called Cycle software. It's audiology practice management software. And we have used that to learn about the hearing aid channel. So instead of going and buying a hearing aid company and making a big thing, we've used Cycle as a way to learn about what's going on in the hearing aid channel, and to help all these providers understand, where a cochlear implant could fit into that patient's hearing journey. Do that through education. Sometimes it's our Cochlear Provider Networks or Cycle members, so that helps with education and all that. But that right now is helping us just through education. So we're just going to continue to do those things. Patty Troutwine, who you know quite well, is spending a lot of time working with people in the industry to try and help cochlear implants become more of a standard of care option, and how do we have that discussion so that when you get from your hearing aid to a hearing loss where a hearing aid might not be your best option, how do you make sure that patient gets the option of learning what cochlear implant is about? And then Cochlear invests in invest the wrong word. We donate money to Franklin's clinic where he's at Johns Hopkins, where he's trying to affect bigger policy decisions. And I think Franklin was pretty significant in working with the government in getting hearing aids covered. Now we'll see if it gets through and gets paid for, and how much, and what that changes.
The budget resolution, yeah.
Yeah.
I do wish it was as simple as paying for it. I mean, I think people pursuing treatment of hearing is a very complex psychosocial issue that goes beyond money, but certainly that would eliminate the barriers, some of the barriers perhaps, but Europe does not enthrall on the data to show us that there's any more penetration with paid for hearing aids as there is with non-paid for hearing aids.
Agree. It's much more complicated than I can get my hearing aid. I mean, there's people who can afford hearing aids who still have them sitting in their drawer and don't use them. Yeah.
And so where do you see the cochlear implant industry, let's say 10 years from now? I mean, where do you see it going?
I think it will continue to grow. The market will continue to grow. The opportunity is quite interesting. It's one of the few industries in the world where the incident rate is higher than the implant rate.
Which is called an epidemic in other diseases, interestingly.
Yeah. And so more people will benefit. There's the working age keeps going up. I am not my father, 60-year-old, right? My father at 60 was a very different 60 than I am, and I'll be 58 pretty soon. I could never imagine him getting a cochlear implant. But I could imagine that in my lifetime, I will be healthy enough and vibrant enough to do things that, at 80, I might want a cochlear implant if I need one. So that's shifting as well. I think you'll see newer technologies, whether they're totally implantable cochlear implants, right? So 24/7 invisible hearing, you'll see that. And in some markets, that's important. Right? Not being seen with an external device is important in some markets. I think you see that. You've spoken to Jan Janssen, our chief technology officer, about all the things that are coming down the pike, whether it's hearing performance, smaller devices, and totally implantable. I think all that will have an effect on industry. Cochlear will still be here. you and I have had this conversation before. I view myself, and I try to get all the Cochlear employees to view themselves as stewards of the industry, leave it a better place than how you found it. So Cochlear will be here and be doing great and providing really good products to people who need them and want them.
Yeah, no, I think that that's really important. I mean, we're all just kind of passing through this space and trying to make it a better space. I mean,
Right.
Same with me. I mean, the point of the podcast is to make it a better space, to go over things that people can. And honestly, for me, it's also it's exploration. Like I get to ask people about stuff that's pretty amazing, right? Like running a cochlear implant company for North America. I mean, it's a pretty cool thing.
I think one of the things that's interesting that's coming down the pike that I never thought I'd actually be involved in is the digital experience for the customer. Right? Why would they have to go to a clinic every year? Why couldn't they figure out, let me see if I can get tested, or at least give an update on how I'm doing to my audiologist and my surgeon, and then they can tell me whether or not I need to come in.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think obviously we have to balance that. One of the things that's going on right now, obviously, are online hearing tests, right? But they're actually online pure tone hearing tests. They're not online pure tone and word discrimination testing, right? And so I don't disagree with you. It's the question is are there subjective or objective measures that can predict whether or not somebody needs to come in? The hardest thing, in my opinion, in this whole space is the psychosocial management of the patient. And so digital experiences, although they could educate and remediate, but we're going to have to go pretty much deeper to understand where people are emotionally and psychosocially along the hearing loss spectrum to be able to then query them and move them in a meaningful way somewhere, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah, no, it doesn't. And I think like most things in life, the 80-20 rule is going to apply here.
right.
20% of your patients, you're not going to want them to be doing that. You're going to want to see them.
You're also going to have to start somewhere, right? So what can you, to figure out what you can do digitally, you're going to have to start doing some stuff digitally, right?
Right.
That
And,
part.
I mean, here's a good one for you. I mean, there are several institutions that still fill out an implant registration card and mail it back to us.
Right.
That should be digital. That should be something that, gets done on the patient's iPhone.
I've been asking for a digital purchase order form in the cochlear implant industry for probably 15 years. And so
Exactly.
I agree with you. I mean, I think one of the other things that's coming, and so this is a good product of the pandemic, is, I mean, interestingly, I did some telemedicine research in the late 90s. And some stuff like, we validated speech therapy at a distance and things like that. A lot of the validation studies in otolaryngology. We did sinus surgery with distant mentoring, all of the stuff. And I was interested in the field, but, kind of it laid fallow because, there were statutory and reimbursement issues that just prevented it. And boom, a pandemic happens and it's a transformative thing. And so I agree with you. The digital experience, I think it's going to also be the ability of these centers of excellence to project their expertise over a further geographical region will make sense as well, right? So for Arizona, if you're in a small town that's, 3 hours from Phoenix, yes, the digital experience, but also our ability to project our expertise into that small town without travel is going to be a huge benefit. And I think that that's imminent.
I agree. I think that the challenge is not the few people that see that possibility. It's the massive size of healthcare and trying to get healthcare industry to change.
Agreed.
There. Could you imagine if healthcare was like financial industry, fintech? How much change would have happened, right? I mean, when's the last time you walked into a bank?
Yeah, well, it's fascinating because I was involved on the reliability standards that were being done that took a really long time. And interestingly, they were initiated by some of the guys who worked at the FDA who subsequently retired during the drafting. It took that long.
Yeah.
But, I was asking him about telemedicine and all of those things. And he said, well, you have to validate that the internet worked. And I mean, it plays to what you're saying. I said, well, I'm highly confident, although I think health information is very important. The financial industry is willing to do trillions of dollars of transactions. And if that were a problem, that wouldn't happen. And frankly, people unfortunately care much more about the fidelity of those than they do necessarily health information. So if the internet works for financial information, I'm pretty sure it's going to work for health information, because that's just the way it is. And so it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see where it goes. But I agree with you. But I mean, that this is a particular niche product that, some geography becomes a little bit of a resistance. And so being able to project across the geography, for me, looking at the state of Arizona, would be very helpful for many people.
I can't imagine that a rancher in Arizona would want to drive 4 hours and give up his day to come to your practice if they could do it digitally.
Agreed. But
Yep.
interestingly, Tony, as you know, having met many people who have hearing loss, it actually speaks of the desperation of the hearing loss, right? And so
Yeah.
the hearing loss is so impactful to them that actually they are willing to drive 8 hours in a day. And that doesn't mean it's right, but it just shows you how profound the impact is of the hearing loss, and how profound the impact is of the intervention in terms of how life-changing it is, right?
Yeah. Well, you know this better than me, right? They have to come in, they have to see you, make a connection with you and your
Right.
practice, and decide, I'm going to get this device. But 3 years later, they're doing great. They have the device. They know who you are. They should be having this conversation like you and I are having right now
Right. Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
morning. Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
disagree with you. And I think that's all coming. So,
Yeah.
well, I think it's been an interesting time for the hearing world and the hearing healthcare space with the pandemic and just some of the transformative changes. And we will see what happens. I mean, probably by the time this is published, the outcome of the Reconciliation Act will be known, whether or not there is hearing coverage and what that really looks like. That's the other thing that'll be interesting to see what that means. I mean, one of the things I will say is hearing aid coverage is different than hearing aid benefits, and patients get very confused about that. And what I mean by
Yeah.
that is a benefit is a certain amount of contribution to the cost of the device. Coverage is coverage, where they cover the cost of the device. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, that in terms
Yep.
of commercial insurance, in terms of when cochlear implants are and aren't covered, or as compared to a benefit, and all of that. So
Yeah. All has to get worked out. All's got to figure out how much they're going to pay. Is it going to get me the hearing aid I want? Yeah. Oh,
it'll be an interesting process.
yeah.
So Tony, I like to ask everybody. There are two questions I ask people. One is let's say you get a lifetime achievement award, and people ask you, who do you thank in your life? So who do you thank? Who are the people, if you were at the dais and getting an award, they'd say I'd like to thank these people. Who would that be in your life?
So I would clearly start with my father, um, immigrant from Italy, came over when he was 18. My grandfather came over when he was 40, something 42, I think. And, if you ask him, why'd you do it? More opportunity, and it's a better life for my family.
Yeah.
So, I'm sitting here saying I didn't want to leave Philadelphia. These people left
You
their
left it
homeland.
away.
Yeah, yeah. So I start there. And he's the one who put the passion for me to work hard, show some interest in things, like what you do and all that. But he was he was a construction worker. He was a heavy equipment operator. He didn't know a whole lot about the business world, which he threw me into when he insisted I go to college, and all that. So when I got there, to outside of college and into my first job, I really didn't know much. I mean, I didn't even know the importance of keeping the shoe shined, right? Back in the mid 80s, when everyone wore ties and suits to work and Chinese shoes. So I had a mentor there, a guy by the name of Craig Smith, who took me under his wing, who taught me just the basic things like that.
Yeah.
Hey, go get a nice suit, do this, do that. These are investments in your career and all that. So, and some business. He's the one that told me work expands the amount of time you give it, when he saw me working late one night at the office, and all that. So, and that's just some of the stuff he taught me, and I still use his principles today. 40 years later, I'm still using his principles. or 35 years later. And then I was lucky enough to work for a small company in the Philadelphia area called Cabot Medical, which was in female healthcare. And they had, at the time, from 1990 to 95, when I worked with them, amazing systems and processes already in place for things. And I was a product manager there, and my mentor there was a guy by the name of Glenn Stahl. And Glenn I still talk to every now and then. He basically told me, he said, look, there's lots of people that do things. There's not a lot of people that think about things and change strategy and have an effect on that. And if you just want to be a doer, have at it. If you want to think about things and have strategy and make bigger changes, think that way. And he's the one actually, from a business point of view, was probably the most influential in where I am today on how I think about things, and how I think others should think about things in the organization, and how I mentor people. So those would be the three that I thank for getting me to Cochlear. And then there's 4 people at Cochlear that I won't say because they may be listening to this podcast, but I've told them personally that have been extremely important in me staying at Cochlear the first 6 months. There were 4 people that helped me understand this is not a medical device industry. This is not as cutthroat as a medical device industry. That, there's a part of this that is different than profit and loss. And, so those 4 people who I've thanked and many times, they know who they are, and they're still at Cochlear. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Doing great. Yeah.
That's great. Well, that's very nice of you, Tony. And then the other question I like to ask everybody, because we are in the hearing and sound business, is what is your favorite sound?
So I have 2.
Okay.
One is I'm a cyclist, but I typically take off from Thanksgiving to Easter because I don't like to cycle in the cold in the Northeast. So what I love to hear come springtime is that click of a shoe going into a bike pedal. And if you're around like 20 people, it's glorious because now it's time to ride. And then I can sit on a beach all day and listen to sounds on the beach, whether it's water coming in the morning when nobody's on the beach, or it's kids laughing on a beach, or then it turns into that at night at 7:00 when everybody's gone and it's just the waves crashing on the beach. Yeah, I can sit there forever. Those are my 2 go-to sounds.
Well, I know it's a beach in Delaware. We don't need to get
Yes.
much, but I know it's a beach in Delaware, and so
it is.
That's excellent, Tony. Well, Tony, if people want to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of you? LinkedIn, or where do they find you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. You could also email me directly, tmanna, MANNA, @cochlear.com. I will respond to your emails. And those are 2 easiest ways to get me. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on social media that much, but LinkedIn and my email is the best ways to get me.
Yeah, he's busy being efficient, getting his stuff done, so he doesn't have expansion of work.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Tony, this has been great. Thanks for coming on. Everybody, this is Tony Manna. He's the president of Cochlear Americas. Thanks for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it, Tony. It's been great to speak to you today. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Great catching up with you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Listen Up podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get updates on future episodes.